Nicholas, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, Nicholas, there's this discussion in the community around scaling and how do things scale, and also how do how do we get more privacy
hmm
in the Bitcoin ecosystem? And I think these are ideas that people are talking about. And I know you're working on some stuff that's obviously very relevant for that as well with Statechains, Mercury Wallet, and stuff like that. So, do you want to maybe give us a bit of an overview how you got into Bitcoin and what your focus is?
Yeah, sure. I'm a software engineer by trade. Worked originally, I'm British, but I spent some time in the US, worked in Silicon Valley, then moved back to the UK. Ended up working for a few of the banks, Merrill Lynch and JP Morgan. Then I found Bitcoin. I'm not exactly sure when, but because it was posted a few times on Slashdot. But I think around 2013, 14, I started to get into it seriously and kind of started looking at. I was working a bit in the OTC markets, and then kind of around 2016 founded CommerceBlock. And originally we were building side chains, so we forked the Elements code base and built kind of our own version of Elements, which is what's used for Liquid, to do like a more KYC version, and put in more requirements for what institutions were looking for. That didn't really take off, as you know. Side chains hasn't really blossomed the way some people thought. And at the time we were always doing privacy stuff anyway, and it just so happened at the time we were looking to pivot. At the time we were looking at building maybe a coin join on a side chain, but it just so happens the way the universe is at the same time. I think Ruben Samsung wrote his paper on state chains, although his paper we haven't followed his paper obviously because his writings required a lot on things like L2, which wasn't available. But we've done some research internally to maybe do something without that. And we were also looking at doing a CoinJoin implementation on a sidechain at the time. And it also just happens at that time there'd been some talk about coin swaps. I think Chris Belcher discussed it on the Bitcoin groups. And just merging those two together, we thought, well, you have this technology that lets you kind of like transfer private keys privately and off chain and coin swaps. And obviously, we didn't just want to build like what's it called again? A state chain implementation and have no use case. And clearly, privacy is being used a lot in Bitcoin. We thought if we merged the two together, that would give something unique and a different, something very different to what's in the market at the moment. And yeah, that was about, again, these decisions were made in the bear market, maybe early 2000. It took a lot longer than expected to go live. We were thinking it was a 6 month project, probably took 18 months. But yeah, recently we've gone live. I think we're very much in beta. I think we officially said we were in beta about 2 weeks ago. But it's getting some usage. Some guys, nothing to do with us, decided to do like a Mercury Torch, and that's been interesting. They found a lot of bugs on the way and kind of put us under pressure. But it's been fun.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit of background then. So, as you're saying, the sidechain idea, probably the most popularly known example is Blockstream's Liquid.
hmm
Now, that has its own trade-offs and its own set of things to wrestle with in terms of what tools we use when we're interacting with it. And so then this idea of state chains came along. And so just for listeners who are not familiar with the idea of state chains as I guess invented by Ruben
hmm
Thompson, and I guess you've taken it in your own pathway, just given the current technology. Could you just give us an overview? What is a state chain?
So at very high level, it takes a private key, which has essentially ownership of a UTXO, and it allows me to say send that to you. Now, of course, the first thing you're going to say, great, send me your private key. Now, what about me? What happens if I remember that key? I can steal your money. Well, I can't remember exactly the way Ruben described it, but I think he used something like adapter signatures to basically make sure that the previous owner couldn't keep the key. We went in a different direction. A lot of that to do was a lot of Ruben's paper was designed around L2, where we basically used MPC, like multi-party computation, where we essentially have a key share. So when someone was to come to our wallet, the first thing they would do is create what we call a state coin, which is basically a state chain, a coin that can be used in a state chain. And we, using two private keys, the clients and the servers, we generate a state coin address, and that's where the money will be deposited to. And then when the user wants to transfer the funds, they have to cooperate with the server to basically create a transaction that would allow the coin at that point to be transferred to the new user. So that's so that and we as the server, you know, we make a promise, and I'll go into how we do that, to delete the previous key share so that a previous owner could never cooperate. So in that, we say we're non-custodial, but in a true sense, we're probably not. But we can explain how we describe it in more detail. But for us, it's non-custodial because there is a risk there where the state chain entity could work with a previous owner. But we've built kind of like an open source HSM, which proves that the previous key has been deleted. So in our sense, it's not. But...
I see. Yeah. So maybe to put it simply, instead of me sending a Bitcoin transaction to you, and normally I sign the transaction with my private key, and really in the background what's going on is my Bitcoin software wallet is doing all this in the background and submitting that transaction onto the blockchain, and therefore all the nodes recognize that. In this case, it's maybe another way, it's like we're blinding the private key and kind of sharing it in a loose sense. Is that
but this is
sort of what's going on?
And this is all happening off chain. So on the Bitcoin blockchain, you don't see any transfer. The key is being sent. Now, we are not censorship resistant. Clearly, if the server was to go down or if we didn't want to cooperate, you're blocked. But every time you do a transfer, you have a backout transaction. So you could basically retrieve your funds. You could say if the server's not cooperating or for whatever reason we're not available, you could just basically issue that backout transaction and your funds basically come back onto the Bitcoin blockchain.
I see. Yeah, so maybe another model people might be used to thinking of is Lightning.
Yes.
So this idea of if we open a channel, I at all times have what's called a force close transaction or a commitment transaction, a pre-signed one that we already agreed to in advance to close out that channel and get the funds back on chain. So I guess in the same way with the state chain idea, let's say I'm opening Statecoin with you. If you're now not available later on, I always have that kind of nuclear option of just, okay, I'm just going to back out transaction or kind of like a force close channel in Lightning.
Yes. And we get compared a lot to Lightning, but obviously Lightning can do any amounts. We're fixed, obviously, because it's a UTXO, and we allow anybody to create any size, but we basically try and force people to go to like a 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, and then 1 Bitcoin. Obviously, because you can only swap fixed amounts. So, and we can't. There's no way to make our UTXOs divisible because they are what they are.
Of course,
so.
Yeah, so I guess this is just naturally part of the trade-off of it. But at the same time, it also reminds me as well of even with some of the privacy wallets, like say Samurai Wallet and their Whirlpool model, they've got the 100,000 sat pool, 1 million, 5 million sat, and 50 million sat pools. So in the same idea that you need a liquidity pool of other users who are in that pool, and in that model, it's remixing, but in this case it's more just that you need enough of an anonymity set of other Statecoin users of that particular denomination, right? So that's in this example, let's say you've got a 1 million sat Statecoin, you need there to be enough other users of 1 million sat Statecoins to give you an anonymity set. So on chain, what does it just look like you're just doing a single signature spend? Like in terms of the Bitcoin blockchain?
Yes.
Or is it just never even touching the block? Like it never even touches the blockchain except for the backout transaction?
Never touches the blockchain. So we do a test to Bitcoin. So all our transactions, we use a protocol which we wrote a while ago called Mainstay, which is a bit like Peter Todd's single seed set. So we do a test once a day of our work anyway. So to prove what we've done. But in terms of the Bitcoin blockchain, you see nothing. So if you open the wallet, you will see that these coins have a lifetime of 3 months, and that's because we use kind of a relative time lock. And this is one of the challenges we had with not having L2. A previous owner in theory could broadcast their transaction and take your funds, but they couldn't do that until this 3 months window is kind of done. So that's why a state chain, and with L2 coming out, if that ever comes out, we don't know, that issue would go away. But at the moment, we're stuck with that. So that's why a state coin has a life cycle, which we've set to 3 months. So for example, if I was to give you a state coin, in that 3 month period, I couldn't broadcast a transaction to take your funds. But after that 3 months, I could. And again, if I did, you still have the concept of like Lightning, where your wallet could be watching and see me do that. But to be absolute safe, we say to people, don't get to that period.
So you need to. Yeah, I was going to ask a little bit about that. So just for listeners who are unfamiliar, L2 is a proposed upgrade by Christian Decker, Rusty, and Roast Beef, and they did a paper on this. And basically, it is it's an upgrade to the Lightning Network that relies on what's called any prev out. So anyone interested, check out episode 200 of my show. Go back and see that one. But back to the Statecoins idea and Mercury Wallet. So I installed it and was playing around, fiddling around with it, and I saw, and also on the website you had a section showing I forgot the exact terminology. Was it expiring, or was it it's this concept you were talking about that you would need to rotate to a new. I'm just trying to find the exact wording for it. But basically, you would have to rotate. So could you tell us a little bit what happens with that? What is that?
So basically, at the moment, we've set this to 3 months. And that's using a check sequence verify. And we do that based on block height. So in that period of 3 months, if a previous owner was to broadcast a transaction, but that wouldn't actually be accepted by the mempool till that 3-month period. But after that 3-month period, a previous owner could. So rather than you've probably seen the wallet. We've tried to make the wallet as user friendly as possible, but rather than go into the details, we just say this is expiring. Rather than if people want to go down into details, why, that's the details. But after 3 months, really, there is a risk a previous owner could take it. So at that point, you can just peg it back to the Bitcoin network, and that's where you pay your Bitcoin transaction fee, and that's where we take a fee as well.
I see. Yeah. So that also gets into the conversation of how sure are we, the user, that you guys have deleted your side of the coin, and that's why you're continually rotating every 3 months to give the user a bit more of an assurance around that, rather than them being vulnerable to quote unquote the back out transaction on your side, where you might theoretically claim that coin.
That you would only be able to. There's only a risk there if you've basically transferred or done a swap, which we assume people would. And at that point, so the way it works, we do have an HSM on the back end, which we built, and it's open source. It's called Lockbox, and that essentially has a key, which that key itself is not a risk, but every time you create a state coin, it kind of generates a new key share. So, and what we've done with the HSM is that we one of the hardest things in computing itself is actually to prove you've deleted something. I can go on my computer and delete something, but we all know it still could be on a buffer or something. So what we did is we used an HSM to do a provable deletion that we've deleted that key. And, it runs on Intel SGX. We're licensed by Intel. We don't have the remote attestations up yet, but that's something we would do. But what would happen if we did not delete a previous key? In theory, a previous owner could cooperate with that key. And, every key is created per transaction. So it'd have to be that key. At that point, there is a risk. So, I think we're one of the first people to open source an HSM. We are using Intel. Now, I know there's kind of risks, with Intel SGX, but for us, it's a small risk. We could not use this. We could just say we're deleting, trust us. But I think we painfully went through the steps of building an open source HSM, registering it with Intel to prove we're deleting that key.
I see.
And it's not just a case.
Okay, so
and it's not just a case where some law enforcement could say open up your HSM. Well, at that point, if we did open up, we would have a key that generates other private keys. So until they could only steal ask to request the funds if there were any transactions afterwards. It's not like we actually have full custody at any point anyway.
I see. Yeah. So I guess just zooming out a little bit, just so people are getting a sense of why are we doing all this stuff, right? So one, I presume it's the scalability aspect, because you don't have to touch the chain unless you need to do the backout transaction. So generally speaking, people are in the quote unquote happy pathway. You're just not touching the chain. And so you're able to transact with these state coins in fixed denominations, let's say 1 million sats, 5 million sats, etc. And you might get a privacy benefit out of this because of the anonymity set generated by having all these other state coin users out there, or state chain users who have state coins and they're transferring them around in fixed denominations. So that's mostly the benefit side. And then the risk side is more the availability. Let's say your server goes down, then they're going to have to do a backout transaction, and then they can no longer do a state coin transaction. And if they're not worried, if they're not careful, and theoretically, if the HSM, I guess there's that risk as well, that you put some money into this state chain and the 3-month expiry happens and you're malicious and something happens there, that's also a risk I guess people have to think about as well. But generally speaking, the main benefits, as we're saying, is scalability and potentially some privacy aspects. Would you agree or disagree, or where would you?
Yeah, it starts to look like one of those kind of Chilean kind of banks, Chilean mint banks. So, it's not censorship resistant, but unlike the Chilean banks where you were relying on a kind of like a multi-sig for custody, you can take your funds out at any time. You do have control there. So, and I think, there's been originally when we were looking at this, we were looking at the Chilean banks, the Fedimint stuff, and some of the writings of Hal Finney, and it did seem Statechains with a combination of Lightning could kind of fill a lot of that. And it's been interesting because recently I think there's been more talk about Chilean banks. The Fedimint stuff got recently funded. So, and we're slightly different, but we have the fixed denominations. There are differences, but there are similarities. And I think Bob McElrath wrote a really good tweet comparing the differences, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I see. And so then, do you see the users having like their motivation? Would you see it as like a privacy motivation then? So is the idea that, let's say they want to quote unquote get some more privacy on their coins, and they would try to put coins, kind of like running your coins through a coin join? Would it be sort of like that? Like they might run it through the state chain and then withdraw outwards and then treat it like that's the fee they're going to pay? Is that what you're thinking?
I think the initial users would be to come in and do a kind of quick privacy, because essentially you can the swaps are free because we couldn't take a fee anyway because these are fixed UTXOs, and you can do as many swaps as you want. I mean, obviously you have this decrementing time lock, but I think someone could go in there, do 20 swaps, and pull out all in a space of a couple of hours, which is a lot faster. It's a different form of privacy than a coin join. I mean, obviously with a coin join, you kind of take a coin, you mix it with other coins, and you're all kind of like grind it together. We're essentially swapping history. So the good things, there's positives and negatives about both approaches. With a coin join, you're kind of all tainted. With a coin swap, you're not, but someone may end up with the North Korea coins or something. But then we would, because we prove with this attestation we do to Bitcoin, if someone was to end up with, say, the dirty coins, they could say, well, I participated in a coin swap, so I'm not dirty. But, and we still don't know how, the chain analytic companies will look at coin swaps. That's kind of like where it gets interesting, to be honest.
Yeah, I see. And so I guess, so the limitation around having set values, let's say 1 million sats, 5 million sats or so on, how do you see people sort of using that? Like it would, because I guess people wouldn't really use it for commerce, right? They wouldn't, because they're not necessarily going to be selling something exactly for, unless they happen to be selling something exactly for 1 million sats, right?
It's not, I mean, look, so if you compare it to Lightning, obviously Lightning is good at what it does, micropayments, but it does need a lot of liquidity locked up in the network. We don't need any liquidity. We're essentially, and I think that's where it complements Lightning very well. And look, we have done, we have had conversations with Lightning devs whether state chain could be an implementation of a channel factory type thing. Although, you can imagine there's a lot of transactions there, a lot of challenges there. I mean, but in theory, it could take a lot of the unnecessary volume of Lightning to do the kind of like the high transactions, the bulk-based transactions. Like in the gold world, how they trade large lots of gold as opposed to micro pieces. I mean, that's the way to think about it. I mean, that starts to become a sidechain in its own right.
Yeah.
But for now, we see people using this as maybe an easier way of doing a coin join, maybe an easier way of doing privacy. And this was really just opening up the first use case for it. Because again, just building a state chain, I think people would have said that's cool, but what do I use it for? So at least here we can say, well, you can participate with coin swap, you can get some privacy, delete, swap your history, and which is what we kind of want to see in Bitcoin anyway at the moment. So.
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see if there's uptake on this idea from a privacy point of view. I could understand maybe the concern might be, I don't want to get the quote unquote North Korea coin or whatever in that example. So that might be what stops people from trying, but it might be something that also just kind of grows over time and people have just as an alternative. I also wanted to come back to what you were saying around any prev out. So if we were to, let's say we did get AnyPrev out and we did get L2, would that then change? Would you then look at changing this model, or how would things
The only
change,
thing would
if
change
at
it.
all?
So we have this decrementing time lock. So you can't do unlimited because every time, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but every time you do a swap, I think it goes down like by 8 hours or something. Or we're still tweaking that at the moment to see. But with any prev out, that would be unlimited. You could swap a million times a day. No one would care. The bottleneck would be the server. So that's where the big change would be. So and we would definitely implement any prev out. I mean, that would I think that means it could be used more. I mean, look, we have had very, very casual conversations with kind of institutions that want to use this for like settlement. And I think any prev out would solve some of their concerns because they could do unlimited transactions throughout the day, etc.
Yeah. And also, I'm curious, I remember some of the discussions, it might have been Ruben chatting about this idea back when, around the time he put that idea out. He was saying there might potentially be this idea of opening Lightning channels off of a state coin. How would that work?
Well, essentially, as we're sending private keys around. So why can't those private keys be state chains, be Lightning channels? Now, from doing this on a whiteboard, that's very logical. But then you can imagine most of our work has been dealing with the attack vectors of previous transactions, etc. Now you can imagine when you add Lightning previous transactions being broadcasted, that makes the problem exponentially. But we are planning to support Lightning, hopefully in the next 3 months, but not combining the two, but maybe paying for the state coin with a Lightning transaction. So at the moment, we take a fee when people peg out. So from a privacy point of view, you could say, well, that coin was part of that coin as it's being pegged out. As you see, the 0.5% fee, that's the 0.5% fee. That's been that's been used in a state coin. But if we took a Lightning payment up front to essentially pay for the state coin, then you would have no taint on chain at all. And I think that's kind of makes Lightning I think Lightning there would be quite interesting. So you would come into the wallet, pay for a state coin with a Lightning transaction, and then you use it for the 3 months, and then it's yours, and there's no fee afterwards. And I think that kind of would give us an opportunity to play with Lightning as well before trying to merge it in together. And I think that would make it even more private. So I think there's benefits there. And that's where we're thinking at the moment. So
yeah. So it's almost like this idea of an out-of-band payment. And so
I think someone said it to me better than maybe I describe it. It's like a virtual open dime.
Right.
I mean, that's the way to.
Yeah, I see.
And that's probably the best way to think of it. So you would come in with your Lightning wallet, buy the open dime USB stick, put your Bitcoin on it, and that's it. You swap it, give it to your friends, make it part of a coin swap, and then you snap it, and that's when you get the money. And that's the way to think.
You break it out open. Yeah.
Well,
so I guess that's the way to think of state coins. And so this idea of having Lightning payments, it just kind of helps take away any on-chain fingerprint of it.
Yes.
And it kind of reminds me of even some of the mining pools offer like a transaction accelerator. So let's say you put it in at one sat and you're stuck, you need to put it through, you can go and make a separate out-of-band Lightning payment to them. So in the same way, here the user is just making an out-of-band payment to you to say, hey, Statechain operator, please let me use the Statechain, use the state coin. And the Lightning payment is just how they are getting around.
So you can imagine then if you get 5 people and they all buy an open dime, you put it in a jar, you shake it, you'll pull a different one out. That's essentially how we're doing a coin swap. And is it a virtual open dime? Maybe it's a virtual Cassasius coin, but I think that helps describes it a bit better.
Yeah, so I guess that's what a state coin is when you're using it. And so then the difference is it's not really like a coin join round. It's more just like you're just joining the anonymity set of all the people who are using that same denomination size of state coin.
Yeah.
And none of this is even touching on chain.
No.
So I guess that's the other factor. So how does it work then if let's say I've got a bigger than 1 million sat UTXO, but I only want to do a 1 million sat state coin. How would that work? Like, let's say I come to you with a 10 million sat, UTXO coin. Is that just basically when I do the deposit to create? So in Mercury Wallet, as an example, I click deposit. I want to create a 1 million sat state coin. It's just I send 1 million sats to that address, and then that's it, right?
Yeah. So if you send the wrong amount, like we had one guy who who thought he sent the right amount, but because the exchange took a bit of the transaction fee and he didn't click in, we then you've still got a stake coin, but then we flag it and you can't really, well, you wouldn't be able to use it for a coin swap, but it's still a valid stake coin. You just have like your own denomination stake coin. So
In a class of his own. But yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm starting to get an idea then of how that works. And so in terms of running the infrastructure around this, so is it leveraging the Electrum server infrastructure as well, and what other pieces are involved? As an example, when I spin up my Mercury wallet, who else am I calling out to?
yeah, so I mean, one of the since we've gone to beta, people have complained sometimes the server's slow. And we realized that the server wasn't slow because we're using Tor under the covers. So we're going to do a lot more to be explicit about what's going on with Tor and provide better. But yeah, so a lot of what we do is with Tor. We ourselves are a Tor hidden service. So that's probably one of the main processes.
Okay.
You connect to an Electrum server, which you can then change into your own. So if you want to run your own node, you can. But we are using Electrum. You then connect to our server, which when you create your stake coin, that goes from our server to our HSM, which essentially creates. I say the HSM has the virtual key of the virtual stake coin, but of the virtual open dime, which we call it, and then you have a separate server for our swaps, which is basically a blinded server, which works very much like a coin join, where you register, you get like a token, you're blinded, and it orchestrates the swaps. At the moment, we do swaps every 3 minutes, but that's really because we're in beta. We probably we're not going to have a lot of liquidity in the early days, but we'll probably go for 1 hour slots, so that people can congregate on the hour if they want to do a swap. So it'd be very similar to what people do with other services similar.
Yeah. And would you be able to explain for us what the blinding is, like just for people who aren't familiar with that?
Yeah, so when you're signing a transaction with the swap server, the swap server is blinded. So in that you get this, it's multi-step. And sometimes it can be unreliable because of Tor, and we're going to do more to like tune that and actually explain when Tor's under attack, etc. But essentially, you register, you get like a token, and then when the members of the swap have all registered, a swap is completed. So everyone signs it blindly, so the server itself doesn't know who's who, and then you get back, and then you can check your coin to see if the history has changed, etc. So it's very hard to know what a good anonymity set, because ultimately, having more is better, but it's not as kind of exponential as logical as a coin join. So you kind of just want to make sure your history is different, etc. And it'll be interesting to see how people view coin joins, how exchanges view coin joins. They probably won't know much about it for the first few years, we hope.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if exchanges have any exchanges and the compliance departments and so on have any.
My personal feeling dealing with them in the past is they won't know it for a while, but then there are people that may end up with this, North Korea coin, but that's why we do these attestations. So you can say, well, I've used Mercury, it's provable in the blockchain. Yeah. I'm not a North Korean, whatever. Yeah. And that's probably.
Yeah. Where they could voluntarily disclose the CoinSwap history out of their wallet, let's say, as an example. Yeah, that's interesting stuff. So then, okay. So then, what kind of services? I guess it's mainly just around the privacy aspect and people who just want to maybe achieve a little bit more privacy. Oh, sorry, that's the other question I had. So there's the concept of Statechains. There's CommerceBlock's implementation of a Statechain, and there's Mercury Wallet, which is one particular way to interact with that. Do you foresee this being something where other people might create a wallet, or other people might create some other wallet and software that's compatible with, let's say, your implementation of the Statechain?
I mean, we wouldn't be opposed to it because, as I said, everything we do is open source. I mean, we haven't specified a protocol because a lot of this was discovery research work, and it's going to be subject to change with changes to Bitcoin. But at the moment, we could be a federation, for example. A lot of people ask why we weren't a federation. We couldn't originally because of the MPC implementation. However, with Schnorr, we could basically aggregate servers on the back end. But at the moment, we're not really looking at that. But I think there's been demand by some people to basically have a spec with Lightning. But I think, that is going to be a challenge. I think, when you start to look at integrating Lightning, there are a lot of attack vectors there, and I think Lightning needs to be a bit more kind of stable, and so do we as well, in terms of like how to deal with like backout transactions and previous owners trying to steal funds. I think it's an interesting
Yeah.
concept because the idea of having like this state coin where you could move from cold storage to some sort of sidechain meta layer to Lightning seamlessly off chain is great, because I think you could see why a state coin you wouldn't have to do the on chain transaction going. But then, is that better than a submarine swap? I don't know. I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done there. But it's great stuff, and I've been invited to a few Twitter Spaces to discuss it with some of the Lightning devs, and Shinobi, Bright, he's been quite looking into that stuff as well. So it's definitely interesting, and I hope it progresses. But I think this is
Yeah, gotcha.
one of the many, hopefully, kind of public and open scaling solutions of Bitcoin, as opposed to it just being all in Coinbase or Revolut or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. And so the idea then would be enough people get into the system of using state coins that they don't have to all touch the chain, and then where the idea is less and less people are touching the chain, so to speak. So in practice, do you think that would be like each individual user, or is it more, you're thinking of it more like different communities? Like as an example, the El Zonte Bitcoin Beach wallet, and each of like their on-chain usage is obviously reflecting for however many 10,000, 15,000 users. Are you thinking of it kind of like that? Like Statecoin users might actually be in the actually representing many, many more users?
I not at the moment, but we're open to it. Again, I think we wanted to get it out there, and even the wallet. I mean, obviously, I know the wallet quite well, but people started using it in ways which I didn't think about, and obviously there were some bugs there, and
Yeah.
but it's opened up. A lot of people now are thinking of different ways of using state chains that I didn't think of, and that's probably the good way, because I guess because my team were quite involved in privacy. Fast coin swap was logical, but now people are saying, could you use this for, I don't know, NFTs or stuff, and the Lightning stuff. We don't have that much experience in Lightning, and I think using it as a channel factory for Lightning is certainly interesting. But
Yeah. Okay. And let's talk a little bit about the Statecoin Torch. Or was that what it's called? Tell us a little bit about what happened there.
Well, yeah, we didn't really go live, mainly because you're kind of worried about. I think you probably remember when Lightning went live. The Lightning dev has spent all time saying, "Don't trust this thing. Don't put much money in it. You never know."
Reckless,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that was the right approach. So we didn't want to have a day where we go live and we suddenly have a few users putting serious money. So we literally just changed the website from test mode to beta, and then we released a video. And I think a group in Samson Mao's Telegram community basically came up with Mercury Torch, and it's been fun. I mean, it has stopped a few times when people have just UI issues, but I think it's moving again today. So essentially on Twitter, people are taking the coin, giving it, and I guess that 3 months is going to go down, and it's going down probably by 8 hours every time there's a switch. So someone's going to be in a position where they will get 0.001 Bitcoin for free. So yeah, it's fun to watch. It's kind of built the community a bit, and got people playing with the wallet, and it's been great for us. Getting real live users as opposed to people who know us or people who use Bitcoin the way we think we use it. And everyone's got a different version of their ideal wallet. My team are Electrum users, which is maybe not the best user experience in the world, but we're very used to that. So
Yeah, definitely. Electrum is an OG wallet. So with the privacy aspect of it, people are. I mean, you mentioned earlier that Tor is built in. So is it automatically running over Tor, basically? So when you open the app image file or the
it's
Mercury Wallet file, it's already built in with Tor.
Yeah, and we're a Tor hidden service as well, so we're not exposed to ClearNet.
Gotcha. I see. So that's how you're handling the networking aspect of it, and so then it's just about seeing whether there's market demand and whether there's like an anonymity set that grows in use of this over time, and so you're hoping that, I guess what would you be hoping to see then over the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, I would like this to be one of the privacy wallets of Bitcoin. I mean, there's two. I think if you look at, a lot of people still use centralized mixers, which are clearly a challenge. They're custodial, they're a huge risk. I think we probably fit in somewhere there. we're not, I think we're non-custodial, but we could get onto an on. You could get into quite a long debate of whether we are or not. But I think we're more non-custodial than say a federation, of some of these layer twos. I think we fit a niche there. I think the user experience is quite easy once it's very simple. You deposit a coin, you click swap a few times, you pull out. So we would like to see some growth, and I think use cases will come up now that we're live that we haven't thought about. I mean, obviously, a lot of debate has come up about merging Lightning on state chains. There's been a lot of Twitter threads on that. So maybe with a live implementation of state chains, maybe other people can look at that as opposed to us. People who probably know Lightning better, because I think, Lightning does have a lot of attack vectors, and so does state chains. And I think merging the two would be quite a challenge right now. But I think now with both of them being live, it's probably worth looking at again.
Yeah, I see. And so currently, as I see the Statecoin possible values right now, it ranges from 100,000 sats to, looks like 1 Bitcoin is the highest in terms of the current, or at least the defaults, right?
Yeah.
But I guess theoretically, people can set their own size. It's just that you would want there to be an actual anonymity set around that, or liquidity around that.
Yeah, I mean, look, if for whatever reason we felt there was a demand, we could easily increase the size, and that would map out to what swap sizes we'd have. So, but that's just suggestions that we thought would work now.
Yeah. So if there's all these whales, for example, who want to mix, 100 coins or 1,000 coins amongst each other, then that could be a thing as well. But it just matters on what's their demand for privacy, and maybe for some of them, they're happy to just keep sitting on their stack and waiting until maybe in the future when they want to actually spend some or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we spoke about the fees as well. So you said it was 0.5%.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the only fee involved, or are there other fees? Or
that's the only fee we can take, because it's a UTXO. It's would be impossible. So we potentially would look at that when we go to Lightning, but and change that, and maybe, I mean, with Lightning there'd be things we could do. We could say buy 1 for X, buy 10 for X divided by 2. I mean, that would give us more creative options, and we have to see how people are using this. I mean, arguably people may just come in, swap, pull out. We don't know if they're going to stay long on the state coin, the state chain itself. So we have to kind of see. We are collecting metrics. We do have, look, so we are going to have an Explorer soon, which all the data we publish, we collect is published. We have databases. We'll publish that, and that'll be viewable from Explorer. So that will give us an idea of how people are using this as well.
Yeah, I see. So it's sort of exploratory, but the hope is that people might be interested in the privacy element of it. And I, as you were saying, the idea of it is in the general or the happy path, you're not touching the chain. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing if people come in, swap, and then, well, I guess they would have to pull, at that point, they're going on chain when they're pulling out, when they're backing out.
But they can come out whenever they want. I mean, there's a key there. They can leave it for 2 months. So depending on how they want to play with it, there's lots of options. So
I see. Yeah. And so then that could give them the ability to, let's say, get around a timing analysis, because if normally in the privacy world, timing analysis is one way where people can get doxed or can be fingerprinted. Let's say if I'm doing it every Sunday at 10 a.m. or whatever, if I do my Statecoin operation at that time, maybe that's a way that someone could try to fingerprint me or whoever. And so this would be, you could come in, swap around as many times as you can, and then ideally before the 3 months expiry, you would back it out then, or you would then have to make sure you do a rollover or to have it to go to a new CSV, right?
Yeah. So the 3 months is our number. We could change that. I guess at the time we thought, well, if we made it 6 months and we were to be taken out, asking people to wait 6 months for their Bitcoin is quite a long time. So we thought, but we don't know how many people are going to use this. Are they just going to come out, swap? Then 3 months is fine. If they stick around longer, if they start using state coins in other ways, which we hadn't thought, maybe we would extend that to 6 months. But I'm hoping that would be logical when you see the behavior patterns of how it's being used, which would be available on the Explorer. So, and again,
so just to go a little bit further into the Lightning stuff, what would it actually look like if we were to go further, like if that were to be a thing, then would it be like you have to then, um, because like trying to do a channel off of that, like I'm just trying to think through how that would work. Like, do you know? Have you like what's been the result of your research into that?
Do you mean like taking a Lightning payment or integrating the both? Or,
Yeah, as in integrating the both.
I mean, we have had some chats. I mean, we have talked to Ruben about it. I mean, we've spoken to him a few times, obviously, and it would be essentially you could come in on your state coin, but the state chain server would not know if that UTXO is a Bitcoin or a Lightning channel. So the idea would
Yeah,
be to make that, as far as the state chain server is, it's just a UTXO. It does not care if it's a Lightning channel or a Bitcoin channel. And in
yeah,
theory, they could be swapped. Now you can start imagine, like, you've got one Bitcoin, I've got like a one Bitcoin Lightning channel, I can swap it. And I think architecturally that sounds pretty cool, but then you think, well, if I've got a Lightning channel, I send it to you, and then I broadcast a previous transaction, and then there's a previous state chain
yeah.
transaction. You can see you're getting into a real mess. But
Getting really complex and
yeah,
messy. Yeah,
but I think eventually that would be possible. But I think there's growth in both ecosystems, and I think that is going to be solvable. Just not really now. I mean,
yeah,
as I said, I spoke casually to some of the Lightning developers on a Twitter Spaces once, and they were like, "Whoa!" We were both like, "There's a lot of attack." The more you go down, the more you think about it logically, you think that this is great. You can do insane stuff because you can essentially move from your cold storage to sidechains type storage to Lightning seamlessly, all off chain. But then when you think of all the ways that you could be attacked, you go, "Oh, I don't want to touch this." And
yeah.
so,
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. And so then going back to just the malicious aspect of
mhm.
like how would you deal with it if the state chain operator was malicious? That's coming back to that angle of you still have the backup transaction,
Yeah.
and is there any sense in which you need to like watch the chain for anything, or how would that work?
Well, the wallet does act like a watchtower. So if a previous owner was to broadcast, it would. But so long as you're in that 3 month period, you have no fear, no problems. Now, there is an issue, and if the server was to be dishonest and switch off the HSMs, but even if a previous owner was to behave with the server like that, you would know about it because you have a current backup transaction which is valid, and that's your proof that the Mercury server has been malicious. And we're not anonymous. We're a team. The company knows who we are, so people know who we are, so they would know that we've behaved in a dishonest way. But again, someone would have to break our remote attestations, which is broadcast to IBM or no, sorry, Intel. So there's a lot of things that would have to go wrong, and people seem to trust a lot of closed source HSMs. Our HSM is public. It's called Lockbox. It's something that we thought would take a couple of months to build, ended up taking 9 months. Building in the SGX environment was a lot more complicated than we thought, but we think it's worth it because we could obviously operate without kind of like an open source HSM, and you'd have to trust us, and you'd have to say, look, we're nice guys, trust us. Now we don't have to say that. We say, well, no, we've got a complex piece of software which is public, open source, anyone could use it, and that proves that we've deleted all these key shares, and the proof goes to Intel. And yeah, we didn't even seek a license with Intel; they came to us. So I guess they've got, being a big company, they've probably got guys, scanning GitHub repos, and they saw we were building an open source SGX kind of like HSM implementation, which was interesting because a lot of people said that you couldn't build MPC in an HSM because of the complexity. So that was actually, but yeah, again, something that should have taken a few weeks was probably 9 months of engineering. But and yeah, maybe that alone will become a project by itself, because I do think there's a space for more kind of research in HSMs, etc., so that people feel more secure with the way servers are behaving, etc.
Cool. Okay. Great. I think those are probably the main questions I had in terms of how it works and things. So I guess for people out there who want to play around with it, do you have any tips for them or anything to keep in mind when they are using it?
Yeah, just go to mercurywallet.com. It's a very, obviously you're an old-time Bitcoiner. People always say, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Yeah, we're now saying, not your keys, still your Bitcoin. So yeah, the UI is, I think the UI is designed for normies, but it is a different concept of using. So, but I'd say download the wallet. Find the lightning, the Mercury Torch on Twitter, get it yourself a free coin, and have a play. It's a different way of thinking, but I think that hopefully this will open up some creativity around what you can do with Bitcoin layer twos. I mean, it's outside of sidechains, you've got Lightning and you've got Statechain, so there's not much options you have outside of the kind of centralized services. So I'm hoping this will make people think a bit differently and have fun with it.
Gotcha. Yeah, excellent. All right, well, let's leave that there. And where can listeners find you online as well if they want to keep up with you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Gregory Nico, or Mercury Wallet. We're slowly growing a presence there. We've been doing daily releases. Now we're in production. We're doing weekly releases, but lots of things that we're going to start happening. And hopefully the Lightning, you'll see the Block Explorer come out in a few weeks, and then hopefully next year you'll start seeing what we can do with Lightning.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining me, Nicholas.
Thanks for having me.